listening to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro, the place to learn about new technology and technological advances before they become mainstream. This podcast is sponsored by Ingram Micro's President's Club, where winners are made. All right, let's get into the show.
Welcome to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro. I'm your host, Carrie Roberts, and my guest today is Jonathan Hawks, the Product Training Manager at Linksys. Welcome to the show. So excited to have you here today.
Hi, thanks for having me, Carrie. I'm very excited to be here.
Today, we're talking about your work from home network and your small business network. Jonathan, how do we know when it's time to update that network?
Well, there's a couple of things to look at. It's not just necessarily when the last time you purchased a new router, last time you think you upgraded your system. There's going to be a couple indicators. One real easy indicator is any type of lag, any type of buffering. Real good indicator is if you open up a web browser, something very simple, doesn't take a lot of bandwidth. If it typically takes more than 2 to 3 seconds to even open up a web browser, that's the first indication that your network probably is due for an upgrade.
And okay, because sometimes I feel like that happens a lot. Is that something that it might happen once in a while, or it would happen all the time?
If it happens on a regular, once in a while, you kind of want to give it just kind of pay attention to it. But if it's happening on a regular basis, or you notice when another device logs on and all of a sudden your device starts to get slower and it's noticeable, then that's a more serious indicator. But yeah, if you're opening up web browsers and it's taking, more than 2 to 3 seconds every time you're logging on, just a web browser, then that is definitely a problem.
Now, is it possible to actually have zero internet issues? And if so, how can we do that so we can increase productivity with better speed, connection, coverage, and range?
So it is very possible. I am actually an example of how I have zero issues currently right now running in my home. There's going to be a couple of factors that come into play though when it's trying to get down to zero issues. One, it's going to be about the internet speed that you have coming in. And then it's also depending on the number of devices that you have connected and how you're using the internet. Most people on average 10 to 15 devices. They're streaming a few devices. Maybe like right now, web chatting is big with all the Zooms and the video conferences. That's going to end up taking up more bandwidth. But to get down to zero, as an example, I currently right now on my home network have about 72 devices currently connected, and we have 8 users actively accessing the internet at the same time, and we have zero issues running on our network. So it absolutely is possible.
That would be lovely. I think for anyone listening, it can be very frustrating when that happens. Like you said, a lot of people are working from home right now with a spouse, with multiple kids, doing things in classrooms, and it can definitely be an issue. And so one of the things that you suggest that is actually, it's more cost effective for someone running a small business to use what's called mesh Wi-Fi. Can you tell us what mesh Wi-Fi is and why you think it's a better option for a small business?
So mesh Wi-Fi in itself is not necessarily a brand new technology. It's been used in corporate America for years, but now it's available kind of on a smaller scale, more for home, for small business. And what a mesh network is basically is you're adding a couple of devices to your network that are all going to talk together to kind of create one network. Traditionally, what larger businesses, medium to larger businesses are using is something called access points. And a mesh network is similar to an access point, except it's on a smaller scale. It's easier to use. You can self-install it, and you can actually manage it all now through an app. And the goal of a mesh network is to blanket your entire environment in 100% Wi-Fi. So from my office down here on the first floor in the corner of the house, all the way up to the girls' room on the 3rd floor, we're going to have 100% Wi-Fi, backyard, front yard, sides of the house, and we're going to actually get the same speed. So when most people have, their router and they have their devices connected to the router, it works well, right? And then the further away they get, the speed starts to slow down. In our home, using a mesh Wi-Fi, we're getting the same speed and constant speed in every room of the house.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Do you have any troubleshooting tips to improve our Wi-Fi if it's acting up at home? So obviously, as you were saying earlier, if it's taking a long time to load pages, it's probably time to update the network as a whole. But any tips for kind of in the moment for what people already have at home?
No, absolutely. So currently right now, if you're using a single router or a more traditional router, kind of an old school router, if it has antennas on the back of that router, if you can adjust those antennas and point them kind of in the direction, a lot of people, when they get their routers, they set them up, put the antennas straight up. That's really good if you want really strong Wi-Fi on your roof. But if you kind of adjust the antennas, move them around, kind of point them in the directions, it'll help increase your signal. Also, if you move your router, you want to place it from kind of hip to shoulder high. You don't have to hang it upside down or anything, but you don't want to bury it in a closet or behind something or on the floor, which I've actually seen a lot of people do. You kind of want it, hip to shoulder high. Give it about a 1 foot space from any walls. Avoid things like trying to put your router near a fish tank or glass or in a room that has a lot of mirrors, because those are all going to kind of deflect and block that Wi-Fi signal. So if you notice you are having troubles and you're only a room away, just try moving the router a little bit, change it up, the position, adjust the antennas, and that's a temporary fix. You probably should notice a little bit of a signal boost, a little bit faster speeds. And at the end of the day, maybe every 3 to 4 days, if you are noticing that there is still a lot of lag, a lot of buffering, unfortunately, you'll probably have to power cycle your router by unplugging it, wait 30 seconds, and plugging it back in. I know that's a pain, but what it's doing, it's kind of clearing the cache, clearing the memory. And when you reboot your router, the router's actually searching for kind of clean and open channels on your network. So that's a temporary fix. Obviously, with the new mesh systems, it's doing all of that for you. So it's something you don't have to worry about.
Real quick, before we jump straight back into the episode today, we want to tell you about Ingram Micro Financial Solutions and how you can maximize your buying power and get to yes with your customers faster. For the last 9 years, Ingram Micro has been Channel Pro's reader's choice for best financing options. Put the power of our credit and leasing options to work for you. You can easily contact Financial Solutions at ingrammicro.com. All right, let's get back to the show.
Now, do you suggest that people have more than one router in their home? And if so, is that based on the amount of people or amount of devices or the size of the home?
Are you talking about mesh or just a standard router?
Either.
Okay, so with a standard router, I have seen cases where their Wi-Fi doesn't reach everywhere, so somebody will get a second line and put in a second router, or they'll use something called a range extender to kind of extend their Wi-Fi off of their existing router. Range extenders are okay, again, a temporary patch. There are some inherent problems with the range extender. Will it boost your Wi-Fi? Sure. But adding two traditional routers in a home can be complicated. Setting one up into access point mode, you kind of got to know what you're doing. They don't really make it as user-friendly as it would be, say, with a mesh system. Now, when you get into mesh systems, that's where you are going to need multiple nodes throughout your home. Each one's going to have a certain amount of square footage, and then depending on the size and the layout. But what's really cool about it is if I do add another node, they're all going to act similar, right? They're all going to act as kind of like their own independent routers, but they all are going to talk to each other and they set up seamlessly. So for ease of use, for speed, for range, yes, you would want multiple mesh nodes in your home, but for productivity and ease of use, you would not want to do that with a traditional router system.
So another question I have is, when somebody is thinking about their Wi-Fi or router, and you were saying to me that, people are using more devices than ever before, do different devices or different things take up more space? So meaning if somebody is on their computer on Zoom, or they're on their phone on Facebook, or they're using an Alexa device, what's kind of the difference, and how do they decide what they need?
Right. And that is a phenomenal question. I appreciate that. Different applications, different, Xbox versus Netflix versus Zoom versus a web browser. To give you an example, a web browser would only take about 2 megabits per second of download speed. And you think about the internet bandwidth that you have coming in, right? So whatever you're paying for a month, and the average I tend to use is 100 megabits, easy number to play with. Think of it as almost like a bank account. Every time you're connecting with a device, it's taking that much bandwidth to use. So every time I open up a web browser off of a computer, that's 2 megabits. Now I go to another computer, open up another web browser, that's another 2 megabits. One of my kids opens up Netflix. If we're watching Netflix streaming in high definition, that's about 25 megabits. So eventually, the more devices we're adding, each one of these, a video doorbell, a web camera, those are going to take about 2 to 5 megs. PC gaming, about 16 megs. Everything that we use online is pretty much taking away from that bank account of that internet speed that we have. Once you kind of reach that cap, and again, you kind of have to do the math, and if you calculate, it's pretty easy to kind of figure out, depending on number of devices you have, right, your internet speed, you're going to start to notice everything is going to get slower. The higher end devices, the streaming, the web browsing, right? So if you're on a Zoom call, but all the other devices in your home are also connected, that could be taking just enough bandwidth to allow that Zoom call to not work efficiently.
Now, one of the questions we ask all of our guests on this show, Jonathan, is where do you see technology going within the next year? And it can pertain to what we're talking about right now, or just kind of your overall vision.
So kind of a combination of both. One, the new AX wireless or Wi-Fi 6 wireless was just released at the beginning of the year. And I see that as taking off from a technology standpoint a lot faster and being adopted a lot quicker than any of the other Wi-Fi standards that have come out so far, just because of what the capabilities are. Typically, a Wi-Fi standard will take 2 to 3 years before it becomes fully adopted. I honestly think the Wi-Fi 6 standard, probably within a year, is going to be more mass adopted by the consumer and by manufacturers than anything we've seen in the last 21 years of Wi-Fi, purely because of the capabilities, the bandwidth, the speed, and the fact that everything now is coming out Wi-Fi enabled. You're really going to need something looking forward to be able to support that. And another aspect of that is I think we're going to get more into AR kind of technology. I love, and I hope we do anyway, I love the augmented reality technology and what it's going to be capable of, but that's also going to require a lot of bandwidth and a really strong Wi-Fi connection. So to move one forward, you're going to have the base. And I think the Wi-Fi standard that just came out with the AX or the Wi-Fi 6 as it's called now is really going to move forward at a lot faster pace.
So we've talked about a lot today. If people have questions about the Wi-Fi 6 or the mesh Wi-Fi or any questions about this at all, where can they do that? They can connect with you online or a website.
Right. Well, on our Linksys.com website, we have a phenomenal resource tab, and we have some amazing engineers and product managers and wonderful marketing people that really are grabbing the pulse of what the consumer is asking for, what our customers are asking for, and they develop content, a lot of questions, comments, concerns. So a lot of the things we've actually talked about today are up already on the Linksys.com site under the Resource Center.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today, Jonathan. We greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. It was truly a pleasure.
If you like this episode or have a question, join the discussion on Twitter at Ingram Tech Soul with the hashtag B2B Tech Talk. Thank you for tuning in and subscribing to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro.
You've been listening to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro. This episode is sponsored by Ingram Micro's President's Club. B2B Tech Talk is a joint production by Sweetfish Media and Ingram Micro. Ingram Micro production handled by Laura Burton and Christine Fan. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe today in your favorite podcast player.